Hello students, I am Sayeda Khan and today we will be learning the poem The Squirrel. It is a short and beautiful poem written by Mildred Bowers Armstrong. Students, have you ever seen a squirrel? Yes, most of you must have seen one. Before we start the poem, let me tell you something about the squirrel. As you can see, the squirrel has a slender body, a bushy tail, padded feet. Its fur is soft and silky, and it has got large eyes. In Greek, the word squirrel means shadow tail. The most iconic behavior of a squirrel is to store nuts for winter. The hind legs of a squirrel are double jointed. They are smart creatures and fantastic runners. Squirrels are omnivore. A group of squirrel is called a scurry or dray. Baby squirrels are called kits or kittens. Here is a poet's description of such a squirrel. Now let me read out each line and explain you the meaning. The first line, he wore a question mark for tail. Students, if you notice the picture carefully, you can see the squirrel's tail looks like a question mark here. So in short, the poet is describing the squirrel's tail as a question mark. Second line, an overcoat of grey. Here, the squirrel's grey fur is described as his overcoat, just as we wear an overcoat during the winter season. Next line, he sat up straight to eat a nut. The squirrel is fond of eating nuts. So here the poet is telling us that he sat straight to eat a nut. Next, he liked to tease and play. Students, this line means that a squirrel is an active and playful animal. And if by chance you try to catch a squirrel, it will dodge you. Let's move on to the next line. And if we ran around his tree, here the poet is conveying us that if you try to catch the squirrel by running around his tree, next he went the other way, the squirrel will dodge you and go the other way. Let me read out the poem to you. The Squirrel by Mildred Bowers Armstrong. He wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play. And if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. Students, now let us see the summary of the poem in short. The poet Mildred Bowers Armstrong describes how the squirrel, covered in grey fur, sits in an upright position on a tree eating a nut. His tail looks like a question mark because of its bent shape. The poet tells us about the nature of the squirrel, that it is innocently naughty and likes to tease anyone who comes near him. Students, I hope you have understood the poem well. Now let's move on to working with the poem. Students, the first question is, why does the poet say the squirrel wore a question mark for tail? Draw a squirrel or find a picture of a squirrel sitting on the ground. How would you describe its tail? Now, can you see, students? Please write the date. in the margin. Then the heading, poem The Squirrel. Let us start with the question answers. So as I read the first question, I'm repeating it again. Why does the poet say the squirrel wore a question mark for tail? Draw a squirrel or find a picture of a squirrel sitting on the ground. How would you describe its tail? So students, you are supposed to draw a picture of a squirrel and you can also color it like I have done. And the answer to this question is the poet said that the squirrel wore a question mark for tail because its tail is twisted, appearing like a question mark. Let's move on to the second question. Do we usually say that an animal wears a tail? What do we say? Think. Does an animal wear a coat? Consult a dictionary if you like and find out how wear is used in different ways. So the answer is we usually say that an animal has a set of given characteristics rather than wear. The poet, however, uses the word wear to indicate the external characteristics of the squirrel. The dictionary meaning of wear suggests something of an outer covering, for instance, clothes. Now let's move on to question number 3. He liked to tease and play. Who is teasing whom? How? The poet liked to tease and play with the squirrel. Whenever the poet went a little closer to the squirrel, it would run away in the other direction. So, students, there are 3 question answers. Now, I prepared some extra questions for you. You are going to write all this in your notebook in neat and clean handwriting. Answer in one sentence each. First, what is being compared to a grey overcoat? The answer is the squirrel's body is being compared to a grey overcoat. Second, discuss the posture of the squirrel as discussed in line 3 of the poem. So, students, line 3 of the poem is he sat up straight to eat a nut. The answer is the squirrel sat up straight to eat a nut. Else, the squirrel usually sits and runs with a bended back. Let's move on to question number 3. What did the squirrel do if someone came too close to his tree? The squirrel would run away in the opposite direction if someone came too close to his tree. Now let's move on to answer in short. The first question is, having observed the squirrels around us, can we say that a squirrel is a fast-paced animal? So the answer is yes. Based on our observation of the squirrels around us, we can say that a squirrel is a fast-paced animal. We rarely come across squirrels sitting still, except when they are biting into the nuts. Usually, we see the squirrels running from one place to another with great energy. Let's move on to the last question. Question number 2. What does the poem say about the poet's choice of subject? I'm repeating the question again. What does the poem say about the poet's choice of subject? The poem is a reflection of the poet's desire to compose poetry on most mundane. The meaning of mundane is to lack interest. I repeat, the poem is a reflection of the poet's desire to compose poetry on most mundane elements that we come across in our day to day surrounding. A squirrel is the most commonly found animal that we can see around us. Yet, Very few of us would have thought of it as a potent, means very powerful subject matter for a writer's pen. The poet very simplistically discusses the various aspects of the squirrel, which each one of us must have observed closely. So, students, with this, I complete the poem, The Squirrel. I hope you all have understood the poem well. Please complete lesson number 1 and the poem, The Squirrel, in your notebooks in neat and clean handwriting. Any extra questions of lesson number 1 or the squirrel which is left out will be given later. Thank you for now. Goodbye.